This is the Indianness podcast, stories of success from leaders and change makers of Indian origin. Why have Indians achieved success across so many different disciplines around the globe? I have no idea, but let's find out together. Because every story is unique, and we have a very unique and special one today. I'm very excited to have Raj Gupta with us today. He's the former CEO of Rohm and Haas, and he was one of the first CEOs of Indian origin in a publicly traded company in the US. Raj also sits on the board of many publicly traded companies now. I invited him on this show as he's been through an amazing journey of change and opportunity, growing from a small town called Mohammadpur in Uttar Pradesh, India, to the CEO of a very large publicly traded company. I want to know how this journey became possible. Welcome, Raj. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on our podcast.
Thank you very much for your introduction.
So, Raj, as they say, to know about the journey and to know about the person, you really have to go to the beginning. So, can you tell us, take us right to the beginning? Where were you born? A little bit about the environment, about your parents and your siblings?
So my father, Phul Prakash, was a civil engineer who graduated from Drexel University in 1941 and spent his entire career in the UP irrigation department, ending up retiring as a chief engineer in the department. My mother was unique. Although born in a little town called Sikandrarao in UP, her father was an overseer in Punjab irrigation department. And she was one of the 5 siblings and spent most of her early years in a hostel, which was unusual in those days for a lady. And she had finished 12th grade of 12th class of education. So she was very educated, very independent. And obviously, like all the marriages in those days, it was an arranged marriage. My father was 21 and my mother was 19. But I would say that, my mother is the one who raised us. She was a strong woman, basically, and cared about the children. She was a homemaker. My father traveled a lot. And she's the one, and we are 6 of us born in 7 years between 1944 and 1951. Wow. 4 daughters and 2 sons. And I was number 2 in that hierarchy. I have 1 older sister. So you can imagine, growing up in a family of 6 little kids run by a strong mother. But I have to give them credit for a lot of things. First, that my father was one of the most honest civil servants you can think of in India. We lived within our means, and their philosophy throughout their life was all we can pay for is education and your food, nothing else. And I think that formed the basis of all of us trying to work hard and stay humble and honest and not worry about the consequences. So in many ways, we all owe a lot to our parents. But my mother did have some strong rules. And one of them was that all her daughters had to get married before they're 20. And none of them could become doctor or engineer. But as it turned out, one of my older sister became professor of botany at Allahabad University. The 2 of them did their master's in physics from Roorkee. The 4th one became a master of education. So they found their passion, and all of them went and have built a career. But they were all married before they were 20 years old as well. In my case and my brother's case, my he was a civil engineer, so he wanted one of his sons to become a mechanical engineer and other one to become an IAS officer. And as you know, in India, in those days, a lot of that guidance came from parents. So I was nominated to become the mechanical engineer. And I was fortunate enough to get accepted at IIT Bombay. Part of my childhood, as I said, my father moved around. So I was born in Mohammadpur in Meerut district. We lived in Bareilly for a number of years. Then we lived in Etawah. Then we lived in Kanpur. Then I lived a year in Aligarh. And then I went to Bombay at age 16. And at age 21, I moved to the United States. So we lived in different cities, and but growing up, but I would say there was a consistency in the way we were all raised and what we believed was important. And I would say, while we were all decent students, there was also a little competition between all of us. And if my sister did well, I had to keep up with her. If I did well, my brother had to keep up with that. So it wasn't something that was forced on us by our parents, but it was something that came naturally. One other thing I would say about my parents, that they didn't believe just in education. Being well-rounded to them was very important. So they encouraged us to play sports. They encouraged us to make friends in social circle and not just be preoccupied by just reading and working hard and getting good grades at school. So all in all, I would say my childhood was a very pleasant experience. I frankly do not think of, except for one instance, and that is something worth mentioning. And I remember that so vividly. 1954, I was like 9 years old, and my father, who used to travel a lot, be given his job, one day entered the house unexpectedly in the evening from a trip, and he was brought prematurely from the trip, and he could barely recognize. He was completely disoriented, and that's why one of his associates brought him home. And he was diagnosed with encephalitis. And that is a day that's stayed with me and still stays with me till today. And frankly, we were fortunate because it took him 6 months of intensive care at Agra Medical College to get cured. And my mother went with our youngest sister, who was 6 months old at that time, of 1 year old. And other 5 of us were basically separated from our parents for a year to be with our uncles and aunts in different parts of the country. And I have vivid memory of that because to me, I thought this was the end of the world for us. But to give him credit and my mother who looked after him, he recovered. He was never the same person, even after recovery, but he was an incredible father. We sort of, spoke very few words, but when he did, they were important. A very caring husband, but also somebody who really was not pushy kind of person. He was very balanced. So that's one memory of my childhood that I will never forget of what we lived through. And we all thought this may be the end of our decent life.
Yeah. Raj, want to ask a few questions on that because you painted such an amazing, vivid picture and, some of those memories. So, Raj, dad moved around quite a bit within UP because of his job. So you moved around also with him, right?
Correct.
So how was that transition? New school, new friends, new environment. Was that difficult for you?
Don't think so. I think, that's something which came naturally. We didn't feel like, where are we and what do we do next? And in fact, but it did lay the foundation, and we'll talk about it. Our ability to then come to United States, move to England, move to France, move to Asia, come back to United States. I think that foundation kind of facilitated the way for us to stay mobile, make friends, adjust to the new culture. All of that really, in a way, was instrumental in making our transitions later in the life much easier.
So that kind of, ability to, adjust has helped you and later on, as you said. So because that was just a natural process for doing that. So Raj, you talked about mom being the one in terms of schooling and stuff like that for homework. Was mom helping?
Very much so. As I said, she was very educated for those times. And I still remember 2 things about it. whenever we'd come back from school, she will sit us, all six of us, around the dining table, and she will make sure we do our homework. And she used to open all our bags. And if she found anything that didn't belong to us, like a pencil, rubber, whatever, she would say, "This is not yours. Where did you find it?" So we would say, "We found it here, we found it there." She said, "Just go back and put it where you found it. This is not yours." So she was very, very much that way, focusing on homework, focusing on things that really made us really straightforward, honest people. The third thing she said, as soon as we finish our homework, go out for an hour, hour and a half, play with your friends. We used to play badminton, hockey, soccer, all the activities. So that's why I said, they raised us as fairly well-rounded people and not just saying, study, study, study kind of focus.
Yeah. So she set some ethical rules by saying, "Hey, this is not right. You need to go back." She was a role model at that time, was she?
She was a role model, and I think even today she remains a role model for all six of us. We actually had her 100th anniversary recently, and unfortunately, her end was very tragic. She was murdered in her own house.
Oh my God.
In Ghaziabad in 1993 by somebody she knew, and we never found out by who. And that's the other saddest memory that I have of our family, is somebody who was so clean living, caring, giving person. And she opened the door to somebody she knew to give them water in the middle of the summer. And whatever they thought, she was living by herself in that house, which we had built for her. And they knew that she was alone. It was a big property. They thought this woman must have a lot of money or whatever. We still don't know the reason, and we still don't know who it was.
Very sorry to hear that. That's Raj. So dad was mainly out on work, right? When evening you were doing homework, dad was not part of the dinner and the homework, right?
No, I would say he used to travel like 2 weeks every month.
Okay.
But when he would be home, he would always, that's the other rule we had is, lunch, breakfast, we did our own times and own things. Sure. But at dinner, all 8 of us will sit down at the table.
Okay.
And that's where we would have conversation about each other, what we were doing. And my father, largely quiet, but, as you say, he was very inquisitive and very interested. So he was not like a distant father by any means, or a disciplinarian father. He was a very engaged father, but he was also a very quiet person. And I would say one of the highest standards in terms of ethics and moral that I can remember. And it was different than, I would say, what was practiced in the area that he was in or by his colleagues. That's why we all ended up going to public schools, local schools, no private schools, no boarding schools, none of that. I think they believed in just living within their means and doing the right thing.
And the schooling, how was schooling for you? A good student, average student? What would you consider yourself?
I would say based on the ranking in the classes, I was a good student.
Good student.
I was, always ended up in schools in early grades, first, second, or third in my class. And the UP board, which is a big exam, more than 2 lakhs. I finished number 6 in the whole UP board. At IIT Bombay, I finished number 2 in my class. So I think I would say I was certainly above average student by
yes. I would say by any standard, for sure. Raj, coming back, mom used to always send you out for an hour and a half for playing games and stuff. And you used to play with siblings or friends, or what was it? And was it competitive?
I would say with siblings, but also a lot of friends. I think one interesting thing I would observe is that although my parents weren't there watching us, but they sort of kept an eye of who we were keeping company with.
How?
Well, to answer the question, we'll come back and ask, who was there today? Who was playing with you? Okay. And they obviously lived in smaller communities. So they knew the neighborhood, they knew the parents, they knew the reputation. So without being direct, but they would just ask, so who were you with?
Mm-hmm.
And occasionally they would say, just be careful. I think that's about it. That's about the instruction that they gave us.
Yeah. So they were watching out,
They were watching out without being, watching over your head all the time.
That's true. Raj, in the 6 siblings, who are you closest to growing up?
I would say, it's a very interesting question that you ask, because I would say 3 of us, the 3 oldest one, my older sister, myself, and my brother, sort of grew up together. Sure. We left home around the same time. And our 3 youngest sisters are very close. So 3 youngest sisters were kind of grew up together. And, even after we had left, they were still together with the parents. They studied in the same room. So I would say it's sort of split between 2 groups.
2 groups. 3 on one side, 3 on the other.
Right.
Yeah. But sister was obviously, leading the way in terms of academics and other stuff for you. And brother was also pushing you because you were so closely, a year apart, right?
Yeah. So I would say, my older sister was an amazing student because she finished her high school at age 12. She finished her MSc in botany from Drexel University at age 19. And she finished her PhD at age 22 from Indian Institute of Agricultural Research. And, then she went on, as I said, to teach in Canada, teach in Libya, teach in India, and was head of the department at UP Agricultural University. And then she started her own business. Unfortunately, she is pretty much in coma today. She has suffered a brain tumor, and for last 3 months, she's not in the best of shape. I just talked to her daughter this morning. But she set an example, and I sort of followed. I would say it was between me and my brother, it was an interesting relationship. So we competed a lot in sports, and he was a lot better sportsman than I could be. He was the lefty, left-hander in everything, badminton to cricket, everything. Yeah. And I was better in studies. So there was always a little dichotomy between us. Yeah. But it wasn't like competing in the same domain. Right. We competed in 2 different domains. And, he pursued a very different career than I did.
Did he get into IS like dad wanted?
No, he didn't. This is another great example. So Allahabad University, Mayo College was the prominent place for students to go and qualify for IAS. So and he was accepted there. He was there. A year into it, my parents realized he is distracted. And he was a bright student. And so pulled him out. He ended up going to Aligarh Muslim University to finish his engineering. And then after 3rd year, he joined Indian Navy. And then he was in the Navy until age 40, and then he left. And then since then, he had done multiple business things around the world and in India and all of that. So he's, he's another thing I would say about our family was the ability to fight the odds. So at age 33, he had a massive heart attack.
Oh my God.
And today he's 77 years old, still active. Always willing to, he has had strokes after that. He had other health issues. But one of the things I say, which is unique about all 6 of us, and probably comes from my mother and father, always staying positive despite the odds.
Yeah.
Whenever we talk to him, even today, I talked to him this morning, said, how you were doing? He said, wonderful. I'm watching the World cricket matches. And, he still goes that place twice a week with his wife. So I think, the ability not to complain too much and stay positive is something that I would say we learned from our parents.
Both mom and dad, both?
Mom and dad. We never heard them complain.
Raj, just briefly want to go back to when dad got sick, because that was a big traumatic time for you, because you were shuttled around between uncles and aunts at that time, and just everything kind of was there. You thought, I mean, so at that time, till that time, life had been in that cocoon, six of you living, dad was traveling, mom was there every night dinner, and suddenly everything kind of fell apart. Dad had to go. What was going through your mind? You thought, hey, I don't know if dad's going to be better again, or am I going to see my your sister went with mom, right, to take care
Young,
of dad?
about a year and a half old.
Yeah.
My mother took her with her,
Okay.
and all five of us were kind of shunted between our uncles and aunts.
Yeah.
It was a time so uncertain about what's ahead.
Mhm.
What we did know, even as little kids, that we lived hand to mouth. We didn't have a lot of wealth. We did not own a property.
Mhm.
And even that time, I would say, and I remember that well. I mean, I think we all sort of worried about what could happen
Mhm.
without knowing how it would unfold. We were too young to know exactly if we had to deal with that adversity, how would we deal with it. But I think we sort of relied on our mother to figure out what we would do if something really bad happened.
Okay. But do you think there was some level of insecurity in your mind, or is that kind of left?
There's no question there was an enormous amount of uncertainty and insecurity. At least in my mind, I can't speak for my siblings, but I think we all went through that phase of not knowing exactly what's ahead of us.
You think that's kind of stayed, that memory has stayed with you for a while?
That obviously the memory has stayed with us, but equally important, it has given us that courage, conviction, or a sense that things can go off track, things don't look good, but stay patient, stay focused, and things will come out okay. And I think that's something that we all have sort of practiced in our lives at different times. And I mean, I can talk about example of my wife's two sisters in their 20s, one dying in a car crash and one dying in a fire, leaving kids behind. And we were living in England at that time. So we have gone through, I would say, our share of tragedies. And when you have a large family, it's probably not unusual. But being able to accept those things and keep moving forward without becoming bitter, cynical, or sad. I think more looking forward as opposed to looking back. Attitude is something that we have learned from those experiences.
Well, that's great. Raj, you made one comment that, if I may just ask you to explain a little more. You said dad was never the same person after the sickness again. What do you mean by that?
So I would say, he was a bright person, active. And I saw after his recovery from illness, he became very self-conscious. So, for example, he could not speak fluently and his mind wasn't as sharp as it was before. And I think he was conscious of that. And as a result, he became more subdued and within himself after that illness. Even he was quite person to start with, but I think he went even more quiet and introverted after that experience.
How old were you at that time?
Well, as I said, I was literally 9-10 years old because it was 54 when he was diagnosed. He was gone for a year. It took him a year to recover. So, and then unfortunately, I mean, he was one thing I would say, my father, number one, never drank, not overweight, He exercised and prayed every day. So he was a very disciplined person. But at age 59, he went to bathroom, and my mother was sitting in the bedroom, and he never came out. And so, so that was another one of those things. And I was in the United States. So I went back to England, and our youngest daughter got the call from India from my cousin. So again, he lived a clean life, caring life, responsible life. And, a year after his retirement at age 58, he was gone.
So a lot of challenges over a period of time, which we'll talk about. So Raj, let's say you finished schooling. Where did the thought of going to IIT come in your mind? I want to hear a little bit about that.
Yep, absolutely. Let me talk about my IIT days and then Cornell and my career if you want. I'd be happy to do that. So as I said, I was the one nominated to become mechanical engineer.
Yep.
And I sat in the all Pan IIT competition and rookie and applied to Banaras. And then, of course, I was fortunate enough to get a decent ranking in the Pan IIT competition. So I went to Kanpur IIT campus, and that's where they ask you, so which IIT you want to go and which branch of engineering you want to study. Mm-hmm. And, I had spent 4 years in Kanpur. So when I went there, they asked me this question. So I said, I want to go to Bombay and I want to do mechanical. So they were puzzled. Hey, Kanpur, you're from UP. Why don't you go here? This is a place for you to be.
Right.
Do you want to go to Bombay? I said, Bombay is a big city and it's, it's something I want to just make a change. So without knowing exactly what to expect. And I was fortunate to get my choice because in those days, almost literally number one choice was mechanical, number two was electrical, like number three was civil, then metallurgy. There were only 5 branches of engineering in those days. And so I was lucky to be selected for IIT Bombay mechanical engineering. And that's what really got me to IIT Bombay. And I would say those 5 years there were interesting experience for 2 reasons. One, obviously in those days, and even probably today, some of the smartest and brightest students aspired to go into IIT. There are many more than the 5 we had in those days. And the second thing was that, it was an interesting experience. Most of them were extremely bright, but also came from, states like Maharashtra and Delhi and modern school and Doon school and all these elite schools. And frankly, I would say they considered kids coming from UP and Bihar as like low class, underprivileged students, And so I think that through 5 years, it took me a while. And I think that's, again, that experience paved the way for me to learn and accept and figure out at the end of the day, people have biases, but once they know you, it all goes away. And that for me has served me so well in my professional career, wherever I was in Europe or United States or in Asia. And I said, okay, well, it is what it is. I'm just going to do what I know what to do, is to just focus on why I'm here. And
was it academically challenging, Raj? Because you suddenly came from UP, good college. Now you are with superstars from around the country, and being very blunt, maybe they're a little more sophisticated than you, so to speak, or at least they think they are more sophisticated than you. Than they think. So, there must have been some adjustment period too, right?
I mean, adjustment was more at a personal level than as a student academic level. Okay. Because, I think, as you said, with this intense competition and you make your effort and you know that you can compete with them successfully and they see it too. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't take very long, 1 semester and 2 semesters, they know that, Raj is as good or better than we are. And it's something that it's a question. and it was more about social acceptance. And it changed over time, over a year, 2 years. But I think it was a good experience that, you should focus on what you're there for. And if you demonstrate that you are capable, a lot of the other things go away. I mean, I tell you an interesting story. And so we had recently a reunion on Zoom of the class of 67.
Wow.
And one of them was, Cyrus Mehta, who was an entrepreneur and a professor at MIT. And he said, Raj, one thing I remember is when you were in the hostel, we all used to line up outside your room to ask you questions and help us do our homework. I mean, this is like 57 years later. He remembered.
Wow.
So I think, proving myself academically paved the way for not feeling an outsider.
Okay.
And I would say even professionally was very much the same. When I had my 25th anniversary dinner at Rohm and Haas, my closing comment was that I felt like an outsider everywhere when I joined. And you have made me feel like an insider everywhere I am. And I think that transition takes time, and I think it takes both sides to really get to that level. And I was very fortunate to work for a company that was just absolutely fantastic for 39 years.
Going back to IIT, slowly you got accepted. Made any friends there, Raj? I mean, Cyrus Mehta, obviously, but any slowly people warmed up to you? Any friends?
Well, it's interesting. So I've made a lot of good friends, but over time, for whatever reason, and almost 3/4 of my class came to the United States. And I have known a number of them, where they are, what they're doing. And that may be just me. I had not kept in touch with most of them, other than some Penn IIT event. That's an interesting question you ask. It's probably true even within my own family. My wife does a remarkable job. She's a lot closer to my family than I am. I'm just I wouldn't say a loner, but I kind of just...
Like that?
I think so. I really think I'm more like my dad. Where when I'm with everybody, I enjoy the company. But it's not like I feel the need to be always connected, be on the phone or doing these kind of things. I don't know why it is like this, but that's the way I am.
Yeah, you're wired that way. Maybe it's a little bit like that. But the IIT experience was good overall. There are no...
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely.
It prepared you well?
It prepared me extremely well. I think it gave me confidence on a number of levels. One was that I can compete with the best of the best. And the second thing was, as I said, the students came from all different states, all different economic strata, and that I can become friends, be accepted by anybody. Okay. And I think irrespective of the class. So I think that those two, and as you know, India is so different in terms of culture, languages, all these issues. And I think it was an elevating experience on both those fronts, that you can compete and you will be accepted.
That's great. Now, you came second in IIT. I want people to understand who don't know IIT, who are listening, is IIT is like the creme de la creme, and then coming second out of that entire class is like just out of the world. So how did that feel? I mean, you, a kid coming out of Mohammadpur in UP, in IIT Powai or Mumbai, and then coming second. Wow, what a journey, Raj. What did it feel like?
I don't know if I have a sense of that. I think since it was building up, every year you got your ranking in the So sometimes I was fourth, sometimes I was third, sometimes I was fifth, and I ended up number 2. So it wasn't like,
it was a big shock.
It was like one big exam that said, okay, I made it kind of thing. So it was like a steady process.
Steady process.
5 years.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
But a big achievement. So then what did you decide to do? You decided to come to the US. Why?
So, it's interesting. That is an interesting question. So a couple of things happened. There was a very interesting relationship between Cornell University and IIT Bombay.
Yeah.
When it's 1963, which was the first graduating class of IIT Bombay Mechanical Engineering, one of them, number one in the class, went to Cornell to do their master's degree in operations research computer science. And the head of the department there, I still remember, Professor Pekop, was so impressed by the quality of this graduate that for a period of 10 years, he gave number 1, 2, and 3 a scholarship to come and do either master's or PhD at Cornell. I mean, so there are at least 30 plus graduates of IIT Bombay Cornell in operations research.
They took the best, they sucked the best from them.
They sucked the best. And, a third of them did their PhD. I'm the one who did master's. So that was my ticket to come to Cornell.
Cornell.
You
didn't know anything about Cornell, right?
It was just the fact there's a precedence of so it was a place I wanted to apply and I was accepted. Except they wrote to me literally, sorry, we gave out too many scholarships, so we'll have to delay your admission by 6 months, or you have choice to pay 1 semester of tuition from your own pocket and you can come now. It's fall of 67. And as I said, my parents didn't have the resources. Money about $1,000 in those days, but it was big enough for them. So I told them I will join you in January of 68 instead of fall of 67. And then I called my professor at IIT Bombay. So he said, Raj, since you got 6 months, I need somebody to help me. I'm working on a project. Can you become my associate lecturer?
Wow.
So I ended up teaching the same class I had just graduated.
Oh my God, at IIT Bombay.
At IIT Bombay.
Wow.
And there were 3 or 4 students who had flunked with me.
So you were teaching your students.
And that was to me was one of the most fascinating experience. They would giggle in the back of the class when they knew me as a kid.
Yeah.
And so I did that for 6 months. And then on January 68, I came.
In the cold, in the winter, you ended up in Ithaca.
Yeah. Ended up in Ithaca, New York. And I tell you another interesting story of that because so when I got the admission and scholarship, a month after it all was finalized, my mom and dad said, and I was like a 22-year-old kid. And I went to Meerut, where my dad was posted in those days, to get my visa to come to the United States. And then my wife's parents from Aligarh, Kamla's parents, just happened to call and say, we understand your son is here. Can you come here and meet our daughter and decide, if we should get them engaged? So, I mean, being a 22-year-old, what do you know? I just told my mother, whatever you want, kind of thing, right? We drove the following day to Aligarh. I just put a ring in her finger and we got engaged. And then I thought I'll come to the United States and probably finish my master's, work for a year and go back and get married. So I had like 4 weeks left. And then 2 days before I was leaving, or 1 week before I was leaving, my parents started to call me in Bombay saying, your marriage is fixed for 26th of January or 28th of January, 68. But they couldn't connect in those days. The phone calls didn't work.
Yeah.
So I took my train back to Delhi, thinking a week later, I'm heading out to the United States. And my parents were there at the old Delhi, and my train stopped at New Delhi, and I got off. So they looked for me on the train to take me to Aligarh for my wedding that evening.
Wow.
And I didn't know, I didn't see them. So I just took a bus and arrived in Meerut, my house keeper saw me. He said, "What are you doing? You're getting married this evening in Iliga."
Oh my God.
So, being an obedient person, I took a shower, got in the bus, and took a bus to Iliga, and that evening I was married.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, and then a week later, I came to the United States in January of '68, and Kamala joined me in August of 1968.
So when you came to United States, how was that, Raj? Tell us. Because you're coming, okay, you were in Bombay, so it was a big city. Still, there was not the communication of the internet to know everything, etc. So, and you were coming in the peak of winter to Ithaca.
So as I said, there were like a lot of president students from IIT Bombay who were at Cornell. Some of them were doing a PhD. So at least there were 5 or 6 alums of IIT on campus in those days. And so I was in communication with one of them. And he said, his roommate is leaving, so I'm most welcome to become his roommate as when I arrive. And he will meet me at the airport, pick me up. So I think, so I knew where exactly I was going to go. And in those days, when we talk about the book, that's like I'd eaten $10 in my pocket at that time. And my flight out of Kennedy to Ithaca got delayed. So I got there late and he didn't show up. I had to take a cab. But all I had was the address of where I was going to stay, 218 Eddy Street, I still remember. And I showed up at the door with $3 in my pocket, right? I mean, so that was the start of the journey at Cornell. And he became a good friend over time. And we stayed together for 8-9 months until Kamala came, and then we moved into married to housing quarters there. So I think that was the start of my journey at Ithaca, New York. Cold weather, small town, not knowing anybody, but it was a very interesting year and a half, 3 semesters that I spent there, because I thought my whole goal was to do PhD and go back and teach at IIT. That was the dream.
Wow.
And frankly, after 1 semester in operations research, it occurred to me, this is so theoretical. This is not something that I can get excited about. So I told my professor, I'm just going to finish my master's and move on. So he was disappointed. And that's what I ended up doing. And I would say one thing is that none of my moves in my career I picked.
Or plan?
Well, eventually it got planned when I got in the corporate career towards the end.
Right.
Really, I wouldn't say it was
some big strategic plan.
No big strategic plan of what I'm going to do and where I'm going to work and how my career was unfold and any of that. That kind of unfolded.
That's true. So you finished the master's because you didn't think you wanted to do PhD. Then what happened, Raj?
So what happened was interesting. So 1969 was a very tough time in the United States.
Right.
Because it was peak of the Vietnam War.
Yep.
Jobs were not easily available. But I was very fortunate. So I interviewed, a dozen companies. And after my master's, I got a job with Burroughs in Detroit, IBM in Endicott, New York, with the Scotch Paper in Philadelphia. Yeah. And I'm trying to remember the St. Regis Paper where I had worked one summer. 4 companies came and offered me a job, and they were all between $11,500 and $12,500 a year compensation, which was pretty competitive.
Yeah.
And it's interesting why I chose Scotch Paper as opposed to any of these big tech names.
IBM or Burroughs, which are big
Burroughs,
tech.
exactly. Yeah. And the reason was simple. I mean, this is why I sort of make decisions based on emotion as well as what do you think makes sense for you. So we were expecting our older daughter. And the only relative I had in the United States was my uncle, who was a professor in statistics at Villanova, just outside of Philadelphia.
Oh.
And the other thing was two other things. One was Scott Paper sent the company plane. You have to remember, 1969, for two of us to come and interview and be sent back the same day.
Oh my God.
And the last thing was that was the warmest of all cities that I had job offers in, Detroit and New York. So those were things that led me to Scott Paper Company, not IBM, not Burroughs.
Not Burroughs. So uncle was there. It was a warm climate and they sent a private plane. Well, great reasons. Why not? Great reasons. So you moved to Philly to join Scott Paper. How was that experience, Raj?
I would say fascinating experience because Scott Paper in those days were the prime in terms of Scott towels and tissues.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And 3 months later, I had a boss who was also IIT Cornell alum.
Oh my!
Okay, he was recruited after I joined the company. Ashok Bakru, still today is a dear friend. And he became my boss. There's only a team of 6 of us working in computer science, operations research, modeling all the paper operations around the world. And so he was a great mentor.
Mm.
And we were working with a person by the name of Philip Lippincott, who was head of strategic planning, who eventually became the CEO.
Mm.
And he really worked with Ashok and me, and he liked us a lot, gave us a lot of opportunities. So I would say that 2.5 years I spent at Scott Paper were very good learning experience as to how we had no history of corporate world or corporate experience in India or anywhere else. So that was good just to see how big companies work. And that was very helpful. And while I was there, for whatever reason, I felt like 2 things. One was my parents were alive and they wanted us to come back to India.
Mm.
And the second thing is, for whatever reason, I felt, computer science, operations research, this is not really something that I can get excited about or build a career. Mm. I want to be in finance or some other function that is more mainstream in the company. So while I was there, I finished my MBA at night school, which was paid for by Scott Paper at Drexel University.
Oh, wow.
So in 1992, I got my MBA in finance from Drexel.
Mm.
But I would say that in terms of foundation, friendship, learning about big corporations was very interesting. And one other thing I would mention, because this is relevance as we talk some more, Scott Paper went from the peak of their business to really becoming a company that was in trouble. Mm. But what happened was they were king of the hill at tissues and towels. And Procter & Gamble acquired this paper company and came out with Pampers and other things. And their technology was far superior. Procter & Gamble had much better access to distribution supermarkets than Scott Paper did. Mm. And they came in and their branding power, their shelf space, and Scott Paper really struggled. Mm. And so when I finished my MBA and my parents wanted me to go back, I said, oh my God, I'm only here 2 years, I may get fired. Despite the fact I had great support. And those 2 fears and then desire to go back to India really led me to start job searching. Okay. And that's really where, again, I got 2 or 3 offers and I ended up joining Rohm and Haas in November of 1971. And Ashok and Phil Lippincott tried to persuade me that I had great opportunities at Scott, I should stay. But once I made a decision, and the reason they joined Scott was the interest. Rohm and Haas was interesting because Scott Paper had no operations in India. Right. And Rohm and Haas had 2 joint ventures with the Modi family in India. Oh. And I was moving in finance and they had operations in India. So I thought that would be my ticket to go back to India. Right. And we did not have to relocate where we had principal in Philadelphia. So we stayed in the same house and just to the other company. So that's how I joined Rohm and Haas in 1970.
Wow. So the reasons why you could potentially move to India But you never did, though.
Never did.
So, but the journey with Rohm and Haas was a long journey for you, right? And
It was a long, fascinating journey. I just, the more I think about and reflect, what an amazing experience it was personally and professionally.
Mhm.
I mean,
any inflection points, Raj, in that period that you said that were critical?
Yeah, actually, there were few. So
Tell us.
I started in finance.
Uh-huh.
And just overall, I mean, I had 13 jobs in that company, worked in 3 continents, and I had 17 bosses. Okay, from British boss, Yugoslavian boss, I mean, you name it. Okay, so I survived all of it. So journey was interesting. So literally 2.5 years into my job, and given my computer experience and finance, one day my CFO, whom I reported to, came to me and said, Raj, the CEO wants to talk to you. So I got scared. I said, I don't know what did I do wrong. So Vince Gregory called me and he said, Raj, we need to do some long-term planning. We have never done long planning. And Fred Schaefer, who's the CFO, says, you're the right person to do it. So you're going to become my assistant and you're going to help us prepare a 5-year plan. And that year and a half, 2 years with him as assistant was an amazing experience. Wow. You know, I literally doubled my salary within a year and a half. From 16.
But maybe the experience also, right?
It was, the experience was amazing. Yeah. He had me prepare these, and instead of somebody else presenting it to the group of 200 senior executives, you're going to tell them what is our 5-year plan. And in front of the audience of 200 people. Wow. I mean, it was an amazing experience. While we were going through this in 1973, 74, when the oil crisis hit, and we had a fiber business, we made nylon and polyester, which was draining money. And we were not at the best of position. And I was working for him. I could see the stress in the organization. He got me involved in things that were pretty transformational for the company. I was like a 27, 28-year-old young man, and traveled with him around the world, meeting very senior people in different companies, and eventually being part of the sale of our fibers business to another company, a Japanese company. And, we were in a crisis point, and I saw how the crisis unfolded and how we navigated during that period of time. And that was a fascinating experience for 2 days working for him. And then for whatever reason, I was in finance, and I always told my boss, I want to be in business. And I want to, this was a very global company. And I always said, I want to be in a overseas assignment. So lo and behold, the next turning point was in 1978, about 70 company. And I was told that your next assignment is going to be in England as the finance chief of our UK operations, which was the second biggest operations of the country outside of the United States. And Kamala was in India, and I told I will accept it because I just wanted to be there, right? I told her at the airport, we're moving to England next month or something. But there was something very interesting that happened. So the CEO at that time, Vince Gregory, he was sort of my mentor. He lived in England for 15 years. His wife was English, and he knew exactly the South Asian and Indian relationship in Britain. Well, before I said yes, he said, Raj, I just want you to know one thing. I know you're hesitating. This is not the country you necessarily wanted to go back for. But here's the deal. If 6 months you are there, you don't like it, give me a call, we'll bring you back.
Wow.
And I would say both first and again, 78 to 81, 82, 83, was a tough time for South Asians in Britain. That's when the Brixton riots happened.
Yeah.
Go home, Paki stuff happened.
Yeah.
And that's where Vanita, our younger daughter, was 4 years old and saw it, heard it. Saw French fries being thrown at her and her grandmother and her mother in a McDonald's store. All of that. And so it was a very testy time. And even at work, I was tested more than once. But again, the IIT experience, childhood experience, just dealt with it. It is what it is. And eventually you'll come to terms with it. And people around you will come to terms and say, I'm not going anywhere. And you have to deal with what you got.
That's
and
true.
so that was a big, important turning point for me career-wise, to accept that and survive and thrive, because I led major restructuring of our UK operations, which was draining resources. Then another turning point 4 years later. They came to me, okay, you want to be in business, so we are going to send you to Brazil. We number 2 and at a Brazilian operation. Well, I had the courage, or whatever it was. I was talking to somebody in a position of authority. I said, why are you sending me to Brazil? Send me to another position in Europe, because this is the region I worked with for 7-8 years. I know what we can do. And I can have more impact here than I learned going to Brazil. And lo and behold, they sent us to France for 5 years. And that's where I led the entire restructuring of our European operations to comply with the emergence of EU. But we had multiple factories making same stuff at small scale in Spain, Germany, and France, and UK, all those. We consolidated those in about 3 or 4 sites. I led the transformation, which was a very interesting journey, because I was working through influence, not by authority. And many of the country managers, the factory managers, the business leaders didn't like what I was doing. So, but I had the support of the leaders in the company to say, this is the right thing for the company to do. And they were my mentors. They were in position of influence. So that was another moving into different culture, different environment, business role. So I think the variety of experiences helped a lot in terms of building my own confidence.
Yeah. I mean, when you did the restructuring, there must have been a lot of pushback, because I presume there was loss of jobs and everything else. So
huge amount of factories closing, loss of jobs, and somebody saying, "Why are you favoring this?" And of course, we had Italian head of Italy, we had a French guy, French head of France, and English wise. Everybody was unhappy with what I was doing. So, but I had the support.
But you dealt with it.
I dealt with it.
And you had support back from Philadelphia.
I had the support back from US, and I had support back from the senior leadership in Europe. They said the compelling logic that I'm presenting here really says we have to do this if we want to be successful down the road.
And so you became well-rounded in multiple locations. Also restructuring finance, you got a lot of exposure. Is that how you ended up at the top?
So first, all those things led to another interesting situation in France.
Mm-hmm.
So we were in this business of water treatment chemicals called ion exchange resins, and we were a world leader.
Mm-hmm.
And we were fortunate to acquire the number 2 company in the world, which was at big facilities in France, UK, and US, and a recognized brand name. And so when we acquired, we had to go through Justice Department approval and all kinds of things. And then they said, this is, since you've been pushing this combination, we want you to run this business. Mm. And I was barely speaking French in those days, and they resented us because we were their fierce competitor. They did not want to be part of this company. They put every hurdle you can think of. So to give credit to
it was a hostile merger.
It was a hostile takeover. It took about 9 months of approval process. It was owned by a US company, but it was basically a French-run company by French people. And I was made the general manager of this combined operation. And I lost most of the senior management in the acquired company. And not only that, they went to another competition and stole a lot of stuff from us.
Oh my gosh.
So that was another interesting experience. Different culture. You wasn't sure who to trust, who not to trust, and how to just justify the investment that we made in this acquisition. And I headed that up for 3 years and made it work. And so I think that was my first business job. So you can see, my experience in jobs were created for me and eliminated afterwards. I was done with them. Special projects. Because, I'm not a chemical engineer. I'm not a chemist. And this was a tech chemical company.
Right.
So I was using more my ability to connect the dots, my logic, my understanding of numbers, what I think is the right thing to do, and working with people who were eminently more qualified about business than I was to really deliver those results. And I think that was my first business experience and probably more transformational in terms of my moving to other roles down the road.
Wow. But must have been pretty stressful those 3 years in France, right?
It was. I mean, I was hesitant to even go to my cafeteria because there will be some nasty stuff written about what is this Indian guy doing, telling us what to do kind of thing on the boards.
Right.
And I would walk into the coffee room, there'll be complete silence. And, it was.
How do you deal with that, Raj? I mean, that's not easy stuff at a personal level also.
I would say a couple of things. First, my wife, Kamala, has been an amazing, amazing supporter. Okay. I mean, she's adventurous. She didn't speak a word of English when she came to the United States. And I'll talk a little bit more about her as to how she has evolved and grown. Only regret is she has never worked and she's not been as successful as her 2 daughters and me. Outside of that, she has been.
Well, she's been successful with.
Well, she has. That's what I keep telling her. I said,
more successful in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely, and more successful. But maybe I should tell her.
Yeah.
So she has always been the rock at home in terms of both making sure families in good bread, and I am supported. And
so during those 3 years, she was a big support to you?
Huge supporter. I mean, socializing, keeping track of the family, taking care of the girls. I was traveling a lot. She was amazing, learning the language, everything. I mean, it's really pretty remarkable what she was able to do, learning French, to play bridge in French, learning all kinds of things. So that was a big help. And the other thing was I found one of my neighbors, France, a pretty global guy, and married to an Egyptian woman. And he was like my sounding board. So, once a week, I'll be, I just have a glass of wine and chat about. So, Philippe, I'm just facing this. How would you deal with it? And he was extremely helpful.
But he was not in the same business.
Oh, no. He was a banker.
He was a banker.
He was a banker. He was not even in the same company. Anything,
but he was just a wise man.
He's a wise man, and I felt comfortable enough to share with him how, what I was facing and how to deal with it. And he had worked abroad, he was very multicultural. And he was always so helpful in terms of sharing how to deal in the French culture and the French people or the French Union in circumstances like that. I think those are the two resources that were. Then, of course, I always had support of my superiors in London, the regional headquarters in Philadelphia. But at the end of the day, you have to produce results.
Yeah. But it was Kamala and Philip, really, who were kind of the rocks.
Those were the rocks.
Wow. Yeah. So then you went back from France then?
No, actually. So after we finished this job in ion exchange resin, built a solid position, realized the value of our investment, I got a call from London saying, we want, this person is decided to leave and we want you to run a global business out of London, which has never been done. We were very regional or country-oriented organization, but we were thinking about a new model, building, running global businesses. And you're going to be our first experiment. So in 1988, I moved back to London. And I was given responsibility for global business, what we call plastics additives. And these are products that go into PVC to make roofs and bottles and all kinds of high performance plastics. And it was a global business with one joint venture with the Japanese technology, and then the rest of it was owned by us. Plant in Japan, plant in Singapore, 2 plants in Europe, 1 in the US, 2 in the US, all around, very global business. And I headed that up for about 3 years. And set up 2 really strong joint ventures with the Japanese company who were more adversaries than friends.
Wow.
And that's when I traveled a lot to China and Japan and Asia. So I did that for about 3-4 years, from 88 to 93. And now this one more turning point. So I was in the US. I'd been away for 15 years.
Yeah.
So I came to US for a business trip. And as I was partying, I went to my CEO's office just to say hello. And I asked him, and he'd been very instrumental. And
this was not Vince, right?
No, it was his replacement, Larry, who again still remains incredibly close friend. Another completely different story. So I went to Larry's office, and he was again a man of few words, like my dad. But the 2 things about him were unique. One was, if you ask a question, you will get a straight answer. Okay. Good. And the second thing, he was a totally apolitical person. He never would tolerate anybody talking negatively about his peers or their colleagues at all.
Good.
And so I asked him a question. I said, Larry, I only have one question for you. Is my career behind me or ahead of me? And he thought for about 10 seconds. And he said, it is definitely ahead of you. If I thought you would make a great CFO, I would have appointed you CFO last year. But I have something better for you in mind. Okay? And so he said, your career is definitely ahead of you, not behind you. A week later, he calls me, he says, Raj, I and board have decided that we are underrepresented in Asia and we are behind in terms of speed with which we are moving. So your next job is going to be head of Asia. And other condition is that you're going to do this from Philadelphia. Your 2 daughters are in college. And the reason you need to be in Philadelphia is that you've been off the reservation for 15 years. And every important decision about Asia is going to be made by senior executives in Philadelphia. Asia is a vast territory. You and Kamala can travel wherever you want, whenever you want, never question you. Put Rohm and Haas on the map in Asia. So that was in 1993. And at that time, our 5% of our revenues and 5% of our profits came from Asia. 5 years I was there, we built 6 factories in China, 2 in India, 1 in Indonesia, 1 in Thailand, 1 in Japan. And by the time we finished, 30% of our revenue by 98 came from Asia, and 40% of our profit came from Asia. And frankly, at the end of the day, that's what led to my being selected. And Kamala and I traveled 6 months a year from New Zealand to Japan, from Indonesia to India. I lived out of the hotels.
But the kids were out by then.
Yeah, younger one was at Yale undergrad. The other one was doing engineering at MIT. In summertime, we wouldn't travel when they were at home. But the rest of the time, we were on the road for 5 years.
Wow.
But what an experience.
What an experience.
And, it was very funny because you got a different, especially in Japan, China, in particular, even in Australia. They would see this Indian guy, being senior role. In those days, it was not seen. So more curiosity. And rather than saying, what's going on here? But once they got to know, again, another example, not easy to get to know the Japanese people. But Kamala and I made some amazing friends.
In Japan?
in Japan. So that was the 5 years of very.
People are people everywhere, I think, right?
That's what it is. That's really what I've learned in life is we all have the same ambitions and goals. And unfortunately, we focus too much on differences than what drives us as common. There are so many things. We all want to do the same thing, work hard, contribute, be rewarded and acknowledged. And be treated as human beings. That's all we want.
That's true.
And we focus on, color, gender, this, religion, all kinds of stuff, which is noise at the end of the day. I shouldn't say that.
So, Raj, to finish the Rohm and Haas story, because there's a few other things, was Larry the person who got you the CEO role, or was he gone, or what happened by that?
No. So I would say, we only had 5 CEOs in 100-year history of the company.
Oh my gosh.
There was the founder, then the son. Founder was there for 40 years. The son was there for 10 years. And then was Vince Gregory, the first non-member. He was there for 20 years. Larry was there for 10 years. And I was there for 10 years. And so it was a company that was great value in culture, very global mindset. And I would say ahead of its time in terms of accepting, because we had 2 German co-founders. Ahead of its time in terms of diversity and accepting people as they were. I mean, we really were at the board level, management level. We were very unique and ahead of our times.
When did you get the call that you were going to be the CEO?
So that was another interesting process. So I think, first of all, as I said, I could not have predicted any one of my next moves. So I think about 2 years before Larry was planning to retire in 98, early 99, in 97, they formed what they call a chairman's committee.
Succession.
Succession. So they put 3 of us in there, myself and 2 Americans. And 3 of us were sort of, quote unquote, going to be contenders for the CEO position. And, again, given the culture of the company, 3 of us decided that while this is going on, we are going to not align other people behind us and promote us or only play politics. We are going to do our jobs and contribute collectively to the company. And I would say by and large, we pursued that pretty well. Year after that, it was clear that one of the 3 wasn't going to be the contender. He didn't have right qualifications. So it was then down to 2 of us. And I was competing with somebody with like 6'3", lean, thin, PhD in chemistry, worked in Brazil, Mexico, Italy, UK, US, head of technology, all of that. Very, similar experience to mine. And myself, a mechanical engineer, 5'7", all of that. And I would say it was probably the combination of the board and Larry who sort of made a bet on me because, again, till to date, I wouldn't know exactly what led to choosing me versus choosing him as the CEO. And unfortunately, that he did not quite accept this decision. But practice in our company was the number 1 got the chairman CEO job and the number 2 got president and chief operating officer. So he stayed for 3-4 years. That was not the best team at the top. Until I finally decided with board's help kind of part company with them. So I think that's something I learned from a governance point of view is not good idea that once you appoint a leader, have the leader, him or her, select their own team. Don't burden them with a team that's
inherited.
It doesn't work. That's one of my strongest convictions.
In the selection of the committee board, was Vince on the board at that time?
No.
Vince, he had no voice there.
No, he did not. If he had a voice, it was more indirect through Larry, who was his successor. Okay. So I'm sure he had some influence. But I think one other thing I should add is that 35% of the company was owned by Haas family and trust. And I knew all of them. So did my competitors. And Vince had a very close relationship with family.
With the family.
And I got to know the family as well. So, I mean, family had more some say in this decision-making process, who they were most comfortable with. But I don't know the nitty-gritty.
You still don't know how it got picked. Don't you think Larry would have had a big say at this?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
I think if Larry didn't want you, then you would be the CEO.
For sure. Absolutely. I mean, he had the strongest voice in it. And the one other thing I would say is Larry is from Mississippi, and so is his wife. Okay. And a very interesting story I will tell you. So the day my announcement came out that I was going to be the chairman CEO and Mike Fitzpatrick was going to be president and chief operating officer, I'm forgetting his name. There's a fellow by the name of Shah who discovered AMT machines at PNC Bank. He's the patent on it. So he is a neighbor of Wilson's.
Oh.
And he went over to their house, just walking his dog, and knocked at the door. And Barbara or Larry opened the door. And he just said, "Congratulations." And I don't even know him, even today. I've never met him.
Oh.
And Larry's and Barbara's response was the best person to get the job, period.
This is how it should be.
It was, basically a very objective approach or whatever they went through. I would say, looking back, there were two things. One is I was more of the out-of-box thinker and unconventional and breaking the mold in terms of thinking beyond and connecting the dots of what we should be doing for the future, like I did in Asia, I did in Europe, as opposed to just running the business in a traditional way. And the second one is perhaps more humble, approachable, and more listening mode as opposed to just directive mode that my competitor was. Those are the only two things I can think of.
These days they call it EQ, emotional quotient.
And I believe that, soft skills today are even more important than just the hard skills.
So that's what a great journey. Raj, you talked about a great journey, but you also have written a book called $8 and a Dream, My American Journey. What led to you writing this book? Can you just tell our listeners, please?
Sure. Before I go there, let me just mention one other thing.
Please.
So in my retirement, I've focused on three things. One has been corporate board, both public and private. And I've been fortunate to serve on the boards of Vanguard, Hewlett-Packard, DuPont, and Tyco, a number of well-known public companies and about 7 private companies. And I've learned a lot in the process. And I've served as chair of 3 companies and chair of committees, and almost all of them in one or the other committees. And I think it's given me a very broad perspective in terms of governance, in terms of talent management, in terms of thinking out of the box and transformationally about strategy and how you manage risk. And I think that's so what I have done in addition to board role have been actually a lot of teaching and sharing ideas and publishing papers at Wharton, Harvard, and Hopkins and others. And that's been my passion, and mentoring others. That's been another one of my, one other statistics I give you, then we'll move on to the book. Out of the 40 senior executives at Rohm and Haas, 24 of them have been CEOs of companies around the world.
Oh my gosh.
So
it's that it's that Raj ecosystem.
Well,
Jack Welch used to have.
Yeah, Rohm and Haas was a mid-sized company. In fact, there's a Harvard Business Review article, The Stealth CEO Factory.
Wow.
And it talks about Danaher and Rohm and Haas. Yeah. And we have had more women CEOs than any company that has ever produced in our industry. And around the world, from China to Japan to Europe to United States, everywhere. And I think to me that speaks something. It's one of the legacies I'm probably most proud of professionally. So let me come back to the book.
Mm-hmm.
So this is about 2014, 2015. So both our daughters had young sons. And they said, Dad, we sort of know the family history. We know our aunts, uncles, and cousins. But these boys, as they grow up, no clue as to how, what state you'll be in and what they'll know about the family. So why don't you document family history? And I'm not a writer, I'm an engineer. So I decided to get somebody who was communications, public relations at Rohm and Haas at Avery. And he just came to house and interviewed me, a bunch of times about just some of what we're doing today, my journey. And then as we were going through it, it became clear that, that personal and professional life are so intertwined that, and they grew up some of the same experiences and they were impacted, and as was I, that they should express themselves as to what it was like growing up with me. Yeah. So there's a chapter which is totally not audited at all, as they spoke, is from my wife and my two daughters. Then I said, it's just me bragging about myself. Let's have my writer interview my colleagues, my board leader, and my predecessors, who were my mentors, so to get their perspective about what was it like working with me. And so there are a lot of input from the person who recruited me. Fred Schaefer was the CFO, Larry Wilson was the CEO, our board chairs, Sandy Moose, and very important, ex-CEO of DuPont, who was my mentor on the boards, and I served with him on 2 or 3 boards, Jack Kroll, about how he saw me as a board leader. And so I think what you have in this book is in fact, if you read the Amazon quotes, it says it's a very authentic, believable story. It is not just about how great I am, but what great things I achieved. And I think two other things I didn't mention is, our older daughter, Dr. Amita Gupta, she's gay. And our partner is professor of neurology at Hopkins, Charlotte Sumner. And Vanita had, short marriage with an Indian lawyer. And then she broke up, and then she been married to Chin Lei, who's a Vietnamese. So, we went through some interesting personal challenges along the way as well. And they're all documented in this book as to what this journey was like as we were navigating my professional life and at the same time dealing with these personal challenges. So that's really what led to this book, is a request from the daughters to write family history and turn into something. And when I tested this with some of the people, they said, this is such an interesting and it honestly told story about individuals, because most of the time when you read stories about business people, it's like, they change the world and
everything is great.
Everything is great. So I share with them many of the challenges that I mentioned along the way and how I do.
Fantastic. Well, I can tell you, it's on Amazon for our listeners.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And just please say the title again for our listeners.
So it's a book, if I can show you, it looks like this. My American Journey,
$8 and a dream. Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm going to get that. What a journey. What a journey, Raj. Amazing. So, you briefly touched on the legacy. So what do you think? I mean, you still have so much more to give, but just talk briefly about what you think is your legacy.
I think of legacy is obviously by the definition of the word, what you leave behind. And so I would say, when I'm gone, if there are 2 things that people can think of and remember is the family. And the second one are the people I invested time with and worked with. They realized their potential and more. And I would say, I never say I'm proud, but I would say I'm thankful for what our 2 daughters are doing. They're pursuing their passion. One in healthcare, older one, Amita, is head of infectious diseases at Hopkins and has been working in India for 20 years. Has got 200 collaborators on TB, HIV, and malaria. And the younger daughter, who is a civil rights lawyer, was head of the Civil Rights Division under President Obama, is currently number 3 in Justice Department, responsible for everything to do on the civil side, including antitrust, environment, human rights, civil rights, voting rights. And most important, her transformational thing was right out of NYU Law School, was freeing 49 prisoners who were convicted in Texas, Tulia, for possession of drugs. These are poor people, 80% of them Blacks, sentenced for 20 to 100 years in jail for a crime they didn't commit. And she freed them, got them settlement, and there's a book called Tulia. And that to me, there is somebody who's they're both so passionate about what they do and meaningful causes, not driven by money, not driven by anything, but making a difference. And I mean, I would say neither Kamala or I sort of basically told them, pursue your passion. We did not suggest you become a doctor or engineer or a computer scientist. I am just thrilled that they are able to make an impact. I think those are the 2 legacies that to me are the ones that are important.
Amazing legacies, I would say. Wow. The 2 daughters who've done well, but also the colleagues that you inspired and mentored. Since you used the word mentor and you said that gives you a lot of thrill, we're building this community. So if, someone who watches your program, and we've had this happen a lot, wants to, other aspiring CEOs of publicly traded companies, etc., wants to have an opportunity for a discussion with you, I hope you'll be open to that, Raj.
Oh, absolutely. I'm more than happy to be open. And if, frankly, if there's a group of 4, 5, 6 of them who want to interact as a group so that they learn from each other, and then I can share some of my experiences, I'm more than happy to do that.
Well, that's wonderful, wonderful. Raj, at the end, we ask the same question to everybody. We're building that cloud. It's a very brief question. Your definition of Indianness. And we have had many, many, many people give definitions, but just a very brief definition that you have.
Yes. So I think of Indianness, this family.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing I would say, humility. I think by and large, Indians tend to be very humble and not arrogant. And I would say the other dimension is our ability to deal with complexity and uncertainty. Because, this is something that we grew up with, dealt with every day, especially the first generation Indians who grew up in India. But I think it's at so many different levels, languages, culture, religion, economic status. I think we are just great at it. And the final thing I would say, the inherent drive and curiosity. Not just be satisfied with what we have. We think we can do more and we can do better.
Those are great ones. Family, flexibility, curiosity, desire to do, humility, desire to do better. Excellent, excellent. Raj, final question, which we also ask everybody. 1 or max 2 people alive, not your family, because you have amazing people who inspire you in your family already, that inspire you, either in India or United States of Indian origin, or in India, or anywhere in the world.
You're talking about Indian or not of Indian origin?
No, of Indian origin.
Of Indian origin.
Alive.
Right.
Who inspires you? Can be in India or can be outside India.
Yeah, no, I get it. So there's so many of them.
I know. And just pick 1 or 2.
Obviously, I'm trying to remember the name of the Akshay Patra founder. from Boston.
Are you talking? I know who you're talking about. Deshpande? Deshpande. Yeah.
Anand
Deshpande. Yeah.
Deshpande. I would say here is somebody who was immensely successful in business, and he sort of got out of it. And then really what he has accomplished since in terms of clean water, actually feeding milk school children, and created this organization. Both he and his wife, and I would say Narayan Murthy and his wife probably fall in the same category, and they're related.
Yep.
Whose two sisters are married to them. I think both of those families to me are, people who had immense success in business and then made this transition into doing something good. And that is just impressive. And we're trying to do in a very small scale with our foundation, Ujala, as well.
I think those are great choices. Raj, what a great conversation. I could talk to you for hours and hours, and maybe we'll do that as a separate podcast. But such an honor and a pleasure and a privilege to have you on our podcast. Thanks so much.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for your patience.
No, not patience. It was so great. Thank you so much.